staff in the Planning Division of the Department of Planning and Zoning have reviewed the application and do recommend that...
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Fairfax County Planning Commission, and we welcome...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and the Commission for the opportunity to speak.
Staff does also find that with the proposed development conditions, the SEA application is...
I am here to oppose the plan amendment to change the land use at the subject
The
property.
MCA does not object to the application provided.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, and welcome to the Planning Commission Roundtable. I'm your host, Pete Murphy, Chairman of the Fairfax County Planning Commission and the Springfield District Planning Commissioner. Tonight we are talking about urban parks. My guests are Sandy Stallman and Andy Dorlester, both from the Fairfax County Park Authority. Sandy, Andy, welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming tonight. You know, we're very proud of our parks in Fairfax County, and as we grow in size, and the population of Fairfax County now is 1.2 million, give or take. And we've made a transition over the years from rural to suburban to urban. But the big thrust right now is going from suburban to urban. And when you do that, you still need the open space, the recreational areas, and the great services the Park Authority provides. Tonight, we're going to talk about urban parks. And when you think about an urban park, I mean, the first thing that comes into my mind is Central Park in New York, because I was a frequent visitor to Central Park and to New York, being from Massachusetts. And the other, I guess, is in Minnesota, I guess, or Chicago, I guess, Millennium Park in Chicago. What about these urban parks? Tell me a little bit about them.
Well, those are iconic parks in our major cities in the United States. We're probably not going to see something like that in Fairfax County, but at the same time, we're going to see something different than the traditional suburban parks that we've had in the county. I think it's really important to understand that parks play a key role in making neighborhoods, and that's what we're doing in these urban areas. A key concept is integrating the parks into these urban neighborhoods, so they're part of the community, and a key way to enhance economically and socially the things that happen in those neighborhoods.
So what's the difference between an urban park and a suburban park?
Well, I think the first difference is their context. Certainly, the suburban context is different than the urban context. So the location and context is different, and how they're accessed. Most of our suburban parks, you have to drive there. Sometimes you can walk there. More and more, we're making our parks walkable. But suburban areas...
Bike rideable.
Yes, and bike rideable, absolutely, absolutely. Suburban parks are generally planned as separate uses. In an urban context, we're trying to integrate the parks into the urban fabric so that in an urban context you have a mix of uses rather than, residential here, commercial here, in a suburban context. In an urban context, those uses are mixed together. And so we want to make the parks part of that mix of uses and connect it to the public realm so that when you're walking down a sidewalk, you may have retail uses that you're walking next to that has residential above it. And the folks who are visiting the retail and who live in the neighborhood can all use the park.
So you're talking about visitors and residents
Absolutely.
in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm. And workers too.
And workers,
Yeah.
would make use of the park.
Yeah, I'd like to add that Sandy talked about suburban parks being large parks out in suburbs that typically people drive to or maybe ride their bike to. And in an urban area, the parks are smaller. Everything's closer together, as Sandy mentioned. The parks are smaller because space is more limited. They're usually smaller than an acre, and sometimes they're very small, like a pocket park at a street corner. They're generally more highly designed than a suburban park. There may be open lawns and wooded areas in suburban parks, but in an urban park, there's more designed hardscapes and fountains, seating areas, and things are closer together in an urban park. It's more condensed design. You might not find a parking lot in an urban park because most people are going to walk to get there, or maybe it's near metro stop, and that's how they would get there. Or they might park on the street next to the park. So it's a different kind of design than you would find in a suburban park.
So you've established, as you have under other projects, that you do guidelines that you use as criteria?
Yes.
What do you want to talk about that for a minute? What are your guidelines? I mean, what do you go by?
Well, we established a urban parks framework to guide us as we transition into urban parks. And it was adopted by the Planning Commission and the board last year and has really given us some good guidance. It includes a typology. So there's a range of types of urban parks that might range from a pocket park, which would be one of the small parks that Andy mentioned, up to a recreation-focused park, which might have an athletic field or recreation facilities, because folks who live in urban areas need the recreation facilities as well. So there's a range of park types that we've established. And then urban design guidelines, so where they should be located, how they should be designed, types of landscaping, and how they should be connected to the public realm are all things that are included in that framework that we've developed to help guide our urban park development.
Mm-hmm.
Does the acreage have anything to do with how you define it? I mean, you mentioned the smaller parks. I mean, is there a limit? Are there parameters?
There's a standard that we've developed that is based on population and employees in an area. So we have a metric that helps guide how much urban park space should be included as these areas transition. So for instance, if a development is proposing 1,000 new residents and 10,000 employees, there's a metric that says you need so much urban park space integrated into that development.
Going back over the years I've served in the Planning Commission, you know, when I first got on the Planning Commission, everything was go west, young man. That's where the big land land masses were, you know. And it was sort of easy to say this is where we should put Braddock Park because the land was plentiful, so to speak. And when you did development out there, you had the opportunity to get the developer to proffer to give so many acres to a park and all that. It's getting more difficult to do that now, isn't it? When you're in a smaller environment
and we're built out.
And we're built out.
Yeah. So the land is more scarce,
Yep.
and the land that's left is not as developable. It may have site constraints that you have to deal with as well. So,
you don't want to put a park in where there's a floodplain.
No. So,
you want to preserve that land, though, I would imagine.
Right.
And that's true.
Yeah.
Right.
So the redevelopment in Fairfax County is mostly going to focus on redevelopment in more urban areas. And that's what we're looking at in this framework.
So let's talk about those areas, the redevelopment areas. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Tysons. I mean, so starting with Tysons, what are some of the other examples? And comment on Tysons, but what are some of the other examples of areas where you would put an urban park?
You take them?
Sure. So we've got all the transit station areas, everywhere the metro stops are located, all the commercial revitalization districts, McLean, Annandale, Bailey's, Richmond Highway, Merrifield. And then we have some areas that are, the comprehensive plan talks about more urban design like Fairfax Center and the Dulles corridor area, and Reston, out in the Reston-Herndon corridor. So it's places that are planned for growth and planned for mixed use and planned for more walkable urban type neighborhoods.
So what about the redevelopment areas? I know the board many years ago determined certain areas in the county as prime areas for redevelopment. And that's turned out to be very successful. I mean, we've seen a lot of revitalization in these areas. There were older areas basically in the east or in the southeast where they were sort of neglected when everybody was looking to the west for the big developments. But talk about like Route 1, I think, had an example of that, as an example of that, Bailey's Crossroads. Any others come to mind? That
Richmond Highway, Annandale, Bailey's Crossroads, Central Springfield.
Yep.
All of those areas have been designated as revitalization areas, and they're prime locations for growth and redevelopment, and have been replanned for mixed-use development and more pedestrian-oriented development. So they're just ripe for incorporating urban parks that will help make them more vibrant and economically viable, because they'll be more attractive and there'll be more there.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why it's so important to incorporate new urban parks in those areas is that historically they've just been commercial areas. They haven't had residential, and they haven't had parks, and they've just been commercial. And when they're being redeveloped with mixed uses, to add residential, we also need to add in the parks to make, as Sandy said, to make it a more complete place, to make it there.
So how do you go about getting the land in an area like Bailey's Crossroads or Route 1 corridor or downtown Springfield, Central Springfield, I guess? I call it downtown. That has never been in the Springfield district since my years on the Planning Commission. It's Lee district, but they call it Central Springfield. How do you do that?
Well, it's challenging, and
to say the least.
Yes, right. Well, most of the growth and potential is going to happen through redevelopment, and as redevelopment happens, that's when the opportunity to look at incorporating and integrating urban parks into that redevelopment occurs. So you have to wait for that redevelopment to occur. It's a little prohibitive to go out and just buy land for parks in these areas, because it's commercial land and very pricey.
It's expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've been working with landowners as they come in for rezonings. A good example is in Merrifield, where the Mosaic District is located. It's now a very active, vibrant kind of place with retail, hotel, residential, and a 1 acre park there that is very popular. It's got a splash pad that kids like to play in. There's an open lawn, there's seating areas, there's some nice plantings, some hardscape area, and it's right next to a new movie theater that has also placed a outdoor video screen on the side of the building, so you can see movies in the park, and it's really kind of a happening place.
Instead of getting closer to Central Park, we're getting closer to Times Square.
Yeah.
But I'm not knocking it, but I mean, that's just the way we're going right now.
Yeah.
So you said you buy it, the land. Is there any other way you get the land in an urban environment besides buying it?
Well, certainly through the redevelopment process, dedication.
Yep.
And in these kinds of places, we don't necessarily have to own the property. So the space could be dedicated to an urban park and be maintained by the property owners as part of the common area that they would provide anyway. As long as they are publicly accessible, that's really the key, and they serve the public, and they have the right mix of things in them.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about active recreation as it applies to an urban park, as opposed to passive recreation. I mean, those are important things, I think, that everybody...
Right. Well, I think regardless of if it's an urban area or a suburban area, people are still going to have a need for recreation.
Right.
So it's more challenging, of course, to incorporate a large footprint recreation facility like, say, an athletic field into an urban area. But some of the smaller footprint recreation facilities can be incorporated into these smaller places. And in Tysons, for instance, we are incorporating the larger footprint facilities as well, because we've planned for it. We've included a metric in the Tysons plan that indicates that if you're building this much square footage, you're responsible for providing athletic fields of a certain size. So we've got some plan foundation for helping provide the recreation that's needed in these urban areas.
How's that working? I mean, as far as athletic fields are concerned. I
Pretty
mean,
well.
We're getting
Is it,
them.
is it good?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
getting them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so far with all the rezonings that have come through for Tysons, we have commitments for about 5 new fields.
Really?
Yeah, and actually the first 2 athletic fields in Tysons are going to be under construction soon and open for the public to use in about a year. And those are being provided as part of a proffer with a development in the north central area of Tysons along Jones Branch Drive.
Yeah.
It's a property that's planned for park and school, and they're going to put a couple of synthetic turf athletic fields on there with lights, with parking, with a picnic pavilion, and it's going to be available for use soon.
You brought up a good point, park and schools. Are you
Yes.
trying to meld those two uses together and using school property as opposed to just
Oh, sure.
park authority property for
yeah.
a park?
It's
I mean,
always-
is that,
always
Is
beneficial.
that working? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, beneficial to co-locate civic uses like that.
Right, right.
And I bet you don't have a problem with lighting in urban parks like we've had some folk, please don't light the ball field, which is sort of counterproductive because we have a lot of athletic groups that like to play ball at night, or
Right.
softball or soccer, or whatever it is, you know.
Well, when we were calculating the need for athletic fields in Tysons, we assumed lighting, because lighting adds capacity
Right.
to the field. So, we kind of needed to do that for that purpose. And but we've had some pushback a little bit from the developers who are proposing these communities, because they're concerned that the future residents may have concerns about the lights. So it's kind of a different situation, because the residents aren't there yet, but those who are building are anticipating that there might be some concerns. So, but so far
But the park authority, in my opinion, and I've seen it from both sides, has made great strides in improving the lighting.
yes.
We were talking earlier before we went on about the bad lighting at Braddock Park. When I first came onto the Planning Commission, it looked like
Right.
Armageddon.
Right.
The lighting at
Right.
night sort of turned the houses around, the orange and purple, and I mean, it really looked like it was out of a movie. But now you have that more directed splash patterns in the parks, and I don't think you'd get as much flack from the citizens because of lighting and intrusion of lighting. You know.
Our lighting systems have gotten so good that you can walk right off the field and be in complete darkness.
Yeah.
So they've come a long way. You're correct.
What are some of the other active recreation facilities that you would find in urban park?
Well, there would be playgrounds, or there may be playable or climbable art, which is appropriate in
Yeah.
an urban park, sport courts, and maybe not just the typical ones that people would think of like basketball and tennis, but smaller courts like for pickleball or bocce, game tables.
I've been waiting for a bocce court at Burke Lake Park for years. I can't tell you how long I've been waiting for a bocce
Well, we'll
court.
consider it.
Please, it was on the list at one time. I don't know what happened to it. you know.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say game tables, where people can
Yeah.
sit and play chess in the park, or concrete ping pong tables that stay outside all the time. Fitness stations, this is becoming a popular thing in urban areas, adult fitness stations. It's like going to the gym and doing your reps for weightlifting
Yeah.
or whatever, but it's outdoors. And so it's kind of like a playground or an outdoor exercise place for adults.
Do you have those tables that are permanent that you can play checkers on? that
Yes.
Stay out?
Yes.
That's
That
great.
sort of
I mean,
thing.
Yeah.
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 Yep. In Tysons, we've seen a proposal for an outdoor running track on a garage rooftop. That's an active use that people will want to use. So there's a wide variety of things that you could see in urban parks for active use.
I guess this depends on the size, but do you staff urban parks? I mean, are there park authority people there, or is it just
Not generally.
Yeah. it's
They
not
would
enough
be
stuff to do it? Yeah.
right. There would be staff for maintenance, that
Yeah.
sort of thing, but not for
Not a permanent
programming per
Does it
se,
have
unless
any
it's a
other
special
amenities?
program.
I'm sorry. Does it have any other amenities like snack bar or something like that, or is that?
Yeah,
Not-
a lot of urban parks actually, when we've been talking to the developers, they want to put street level retail right next to the park, or even a retail kiosk at the corner of the park. For example, the park in Mosaic
Mosaic, yeah.
has a little cafe, glass kind of building cafe right there next to the park. So we have seen an interest in that, and that helps to create interest in activity. Yeah.
How about something that's sweeping the country right now? Dog parks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when you consider that most of the folks who are going to live in these urban areas don't have a yard, and many of them want to have pets, dog
2 to
parks,
3 dogs, by
yeah,
the way.
yeah.
In some apartment houses, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important to provide space for them to walk and exercise, the dogs. And dog parks are very social, so there's a community building aspect to the dog parks that is important as well.
It's a place to meet and greet.
That's
That's
right.
right.
That's
Know your
right.
neighborhood dog.
That's right. That's right. A lot of romances made in dog parks.
What about the
Two-legged and
concept of
four-legged.
putting recreation or parks on top of buildings? I mean, are we moving out in that direction? Because I know that's
Absolutely.
big in New York. We mentioned that earlier.
Absolutely. We've seen a lot of plans for that in Tysons.
Yeah.
A lot of residential buildings put their swimming pool on the building
Yeah.
roof itself, but we're also seeing on the roof of the parking garages some of those private amenity areas for residential buildings, but we're also seeing public park spaces that have sport courts, athletic fields, running tracks, playgrounds, all of that. It's a great use of a parking garage rooftop that otherwise would be just unattractive asphalt, cement.
Yeah, New York knows how to make use of their rooftops.
Absolutely.
I mean, they really
Yes.
do. Besides water
Yeah.
tanks, they have recreation. So
right.
maybe I can get a bocce court on a garage in the Springfield district.
Maybe you could.
That's
I'll
right,
get
that's
my
right.
bocce
Maybe you
court,
could.
yeah. Well, we did that. There was a plan at Brook Lake Park, not only to put in the miniature golf course, but other amenities too. And it sort of stopped at the miniature golf course, which is very successful out there. So,
Yeah, it is. It is.
what else is going into these parks besides the recreational stuff? I mean, do you have anything that's you just lay back or
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of just like seating areas for if you want to go read a book or just sit or meet someone and socialize, and performing areas. So amphitheaters and space for programming, space for classes like Tai Chi or yoga in the outdoors. So those are real important, and keeping them flexible so that you can program them for lots of different interests is important.
Can you move the trailer? You have these trailers for shows. The stages,
showmobile.
The showmobiles,
Right.
I mean, could that be something
Right.
that we could find in an urban park? 'Cause
Sure.
You put on a
Absolutely.
lot of great
Yeah, we
shows
do.
with
Yeah.
those.
And some urban parks are being designed with a hardscape area that is a little bit elevated from the rest of the park so it can serve as a stage. We're looking at some urban parks in Tysons where they're thinking about building into that area electrical outlets so that performers can plug in their equipment, their speakers, making it adaptable to different kinds of events, musical events, farmers markets, say the beginning and ending of a race, different kinds of community events.
Now, that's a good point, can you have like 5K runs in these parks? I mean, that's a big thing now, is
Exactly,
to
yeah.
have a
Right.
club, put together a race. A lot of them do it for
Right.
charity, which is a great thing. And that brings the urban community out into
That's
a central
right. Exactly.
location.
That's right.
How many parks are planned for Tysons? Do you have a number? Is there a goal?
There is a goal.
As many as we need.
That's
The
right. goal.
comprehensive plan sets forth a goal based on projected population and employment for Tysons, which you've probably heard many times. There will be 200,000 employees and about 100,000 people living in Tysons
Is that all?
by the year 2050. That's right. And so taking those projections and using our urban park land standard, we think there's going to be a need for another 150 acres of parks in Tysons in the next 30 years. Yeah.
Will you be able to get that?
Well, we're well on the way.
Okay.
With all the rezoning cases that have been approved, I think there's been about half a dozen or maybe a few more than that, 6, 7, 8 that have been approved. We've already gotten commitments to provide about 40 acres of new park spaces distributed throughout Tysons. Yeah.
One thing, and I was part of this action back in the late 80s, we did not do well in Fairfax Center. We didn't plan well for recreational facilities. And a lot of the space we were using for parks, and especially ball fields, were on a loan basis. You can stay here as long as you want to, but when we want to redevelop the land, you're going to have to move out. And we had to kick out a lot of those facilities, which was a shame. Patriot Park is an answer to that. I hope sometime we can get the money we need to continue developing that, because I mean, as someone who goes by that park at different times of the evening and the
Always
afternoon
in
and,
use.
and late at night. There's always some, I've seen them in the
I know.
pouring rain out there
Yes.
playing, and that is a really, that really is, I know it's not right in the, you know, the mix of urbanization
Yeah.
of this area, but it's close enough to be, I consider it to be an urban
Yeah.
park.
And it's certainly serving a need.
It really is.
really
I mean, it's
is.
huge. And it's not a Springfield district thing or a
No,
Braddock district
right.
thing. It is a county park
Yeah.
that serves a huge population.
Yeah.
How about that? What are your most active parks now in the county? I bet you can. That's a tough question, but
Well, I think, you know, certainly during good weather, our lakefront parks.
yeah,
Burke Lake is.
Water.
Oh, yeah.
Water is
And,
the
and,
draw.
and the mix of uses that are there, all the different things that are at Burke Lake, or,
Yeah.
you know, it's one of the more popular. Lake Acatink is another one, and Lake Fairfax. So those lakefront parks
Lakefront,
really
yeah.
serve a great countywide need. And then, you know, the district parks with the athletic fields and
the
those
rec
sorts of
centers.
things. And the rec centers are always busy.
Hey,
And
you talk
certainly our
about
golf
business
courses
people,
too.
business people in urban areas using the parks. Anything coming up on a golf course scale? I mean, is there room for any place to have a golf course? Because we always need golf courses.
Well,
Wow.
golf courses don't really fit in with the urban
Oh, they
model
don't? Okay,
because of
all
how
right.
much land they take up.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Most urban parks are pretty small, you know, an acre or less. For lakefronts and golf courses, people are going to have to go out to the suburbs. But we hope that the urban parks will provide enough interest and variety to keep people,
Well,
you know,
Sandy
entertained.
and Andy, I got our call it quits right now. It's been very informative, and we wish you the best of luck in
Yeah,
your
thank
endeavors
you.
because we're very proud of our parks and the people who run them. You've got great
Thanks.
people staffing the parks and making everybody feel at home. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions on any of our topics that you would like answered, mail or email them to one of the addresses now appearing on your screen. We will answer as many as we can on upcoming programs. Until then, I'm Pete Murphy. Good night.